Hello and welcome everyone to the first podcast for day 40, chapter 55, where we'll talk about ecosystems. For these podcasts, there are going to be four separate podcasts covering each of the four objectives. In this first one, there's going to be some review to this, talking about ecosystems and trophic structures and producers and consumers. And then the rest of the objectives will be fairly new to you. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started with this first podcast and begin by defining ecosystem. So we can define ecosystem by saying all the organisms interacting with each other and the abiotic factors. So another more simple way to put this might be all the biotic factors plus the abiotic factors in an area. Now the next couple points we need to make here from Objective 1 will be a review from when we talked about community ecology, but it feeds nicely into what we're talking about here. So let's just take a few moments to talk about this. And let's think about a trophic structure. And we can think of these as the different feeding relationships in an ecosystem. So thinking about these trophic levels, let's begin by making a food chain. We know at the bottom of the food chain are our primary producers. These are going to be like our plants, a flower of some sort, or any of our plants that we talked about. Above the plant would be our primary consumers. These are going to be like our herbivores, so like a ladybug. I'm going to put over here the term herbivore. These are our plant eaters. And I should have indicated down here, these are our autotrophs. You should know that because we're talking about plants, but autotrophs. Autotrophs. And we always draw a line in the direction of the energy flow. So the energy from the producers now go to the consumers, and now the energy from the consumers will go to the secondary consumers. And this might be, say, a frog. A frog is going to eat an herbivore, a ladybug, a cricket, a fly, what have you there. These are going to be carnivores. Carnivores are animals that eat other animals. These could also be omnivores, but we'll come back to that in a moment. O-M-N-I-V-O-R-E, omnivore. Next, the energy will pass up the trophic levels here to our tertiary consumers. This could be some kind of fish or lizard. Something like that, that would eat the secondary consumer like a frog. These are also carnivores. They could also be omnivores too. Then finally, we'll end this with a quaternary consumer. And these are going to be something that eats the tertiary consumer. It could be a bigger fish. It may be could be a bear. I know bears will eat a lizard, but they'll eat fish, so we'll use that as our example. And these are also carnivores. Now, one problem with this tree is that it goes in one direction. It goes in one direction. Energy moves up the ladder this way. The problem with this is that animals at these different levels aren't constrained to only being able to eat a tertiary consumer. For instance, a bear may eat plants. They may eat berries. So we would have to have an arrow up here too. Energy can transfer straight from the primary producers right to the quaternary consumer. In addition, fish and lizards, fish sometimes will eat various kinds of plants too, aquatic plants, or I should say algae. So it could go this way. A fish may also eat one of these primary consumers, one of these herbivores. So the important thing to realize, that a few take-home points, is that you need to know the definitions of these structures here, these trophic levels here. You should be able to come up with some examples. If we give you these examples and tell you what they do, you should be able to identify where they fit in the web or a tree. You should know the definitions of carnivores and herbivores and omnivores. And let me define what an omnivore is. And remember, I said that each of these could be omnivores too. So I'm just going to write omni here. And an omnivore is just an organism that will eat both meat and plants. So like a bear would be a classic case of an omnivore. There are some animals that only eat meat, and they would be carnivores. There's one more group of organisms we need to talk about. And there's not a convenient place to put it on here, but I want to include it with all this other information. And so I'm going to just write it up here. These are our detritivores. Detritivores are consumers, so let's go and write that down. They are consumers. But they get their energy from non-living organic material. For instance, when all of these organisms in this web that we drew here die, and they will die eventually, they're decaying corpses, or like a fallen tree. These all would be considered non-living organic material, and these detritivores will consume those. Sometimes we call these decomposers. These would include various kinds of fungi, as well as different types of bacteria that help recycle all of this energy once these organisms have died. Alright, that ends Objective 1 and our first podcast. If you have any questions, please let me know, and we'll answer any questions you have. Alright, good luck. See you in class.